Mystery 8 Blind Frog Ranch. When Chad first arrived in the high desert of eastern Utah, the sun was dropping low behind the red cliffs, painting the sky with strokes of crimson and gold. He hadn't expected much. Just land, isolation, and an agreement inked on paper. The Jensen family, an old and powerful Mormon dynasty, had claimed him in the way families sometimes did in fringe parts of America. He wasn't adopted, not exactly. More like absorbed, like a wayward thread stitched back into an ancestral quilt. The Jensens were not like other families. They didn't speak much, but they prayed with intensity. They worked the land from dawn until the bones ached, and they ate meals in silence, heads bowed as if waiting for some divine whisper. Their compound sat just a few miles from Blind Frog Ranch, a place soaked in old stories and older blood. Most locals avoided it, whispering of things buried beneath, of lights that danced over the hills at night, and of men who went in and never came out. Chad was drawn to it. Maybe it was the silence of the Jensen home. Maybe it was the suffocating sense of righteousness that clung to their walls like dust. Or maybe it was the strange map he found rolled up in the attic, tucked inside a hollowed-out Bible. The paper was old and cracked, drawn with spidery ink that smelled of soot and time. At the center, Blind Frog Ranch. He studied it in secret, tracing faded lines that wove like veins across the landscape. Symbols dotted the margins, ciphers, alchemical signs, and a rough sketch of a shaft descending deep beneath the earth. At the bottom, 2 words etched in firm, deliberate hand: true inheritance. Chad waited until the family left for Provo one weekend, attending some religious gathering that demanded all their purity and presence. He took a beaten-up ATV, packed water and a flashlight, and followed the map like it was scripture. Blind Frog Ranch loomed larger in person than in any photograph he'd seen. The fences were rusted, the gates chained, but nothing was truly locked in this land. He slipped through, boots crunching dry grass, the wind whispering like a secret being told again and again. The air was strange, charged, almost humming. He followed the map past a broken windmill, over a dried-up creek bed, until he came to a place where the rocks split like a wound. The entrance was there, hidden behind a curtain of hanging sagebrush. It wasn't a cave, not really. It looked made. Too square, too deliberate. He ducked inside, flashlight trembling in his hand. The shaft sloped down steeply. Old timber beams held the ceiling aloft, creaking like tired bones. The air was thick, wet, metallic. He descended slowly, feeling the weight of the earth settle over him like a heavy blanket. The map had shown turns, a fork, and a drop. He counted his steps, turned when instructed, and found the ladder, its rungs black with age. He climbed down, deeper, until the light of the surface was only a memory. And then, the tunnel opened. It wasn't natural. Smooth stone walls, marked with carvings not of this century, maybe not even this world. Spirals, serpents, stars. At the far end, a door. Not wood, not metal, something else. It shimmered, slightly translucent, like oil on water. He reached out. It opened. Inside, a chamber. Wide, circular, with a domed ceiling and a stone pedestal at the center. On it sat a cube, blacker than coal, absorbing the flashlight's beam entirely. Around the pedestal, bones. Not human. Too long, too narrow. Some still had scraps of cloth, military tags, even a rusted revolver. He knew what this place was, even if he didn't have the words for it. He took the cube. The moment he touched it, something pulsed. The mind groaned, and he could feel, not hear, the hum rise around him. Not sound, but resonance. It felt like it vibrated inside his bones, like it knew him. When he climbed back to the surface, night had fallen. The desert sky was alive with stars, more than he'd ever seen, and in the distance, lights flickered along the ridgeline. Not fires, not headlights. Blue. Pulsing. Watching. He returned home before the family. He cleaned his boots, stashed the cue beneath a loose floorboard in the barn, and never mentioned the mine. But things changed. The Jensens noticed it first. Crops grew faster. The old bull, once blind and stumbling, began to walk without pain. Machinery that hadn't worked in years roared to life without repair. And Chad changed. He didn't sleep much. He didn't eat much either. But he felt more awake than ever, as if something in him had switched on. He saw patterns in things. Numbers in the fields, rhythms in bird calls, messages in the static of the old radio in the shed. He could sense things too. When people lied, when storms were coming, even when coyotes would strike the chicken coop. The Jensens began watching him. He noticed the glances during prayers, the subtle distancing at meals. Brother Jensen, patriarch, began carrying a key around his neck that glowed faintly when Chad entered a room. They asked him where he'd been. They asked about the attic. They asked about the cube. He said nothing. One night, he returned to the barn to find the floorboard pried up, the cube gone. The family stood there, 9 of them in white robes, silent and grim. Brother Jensen held the cue with gloved hands. Around him, symbols drawn in ash on the dirt floor, echoing the ones in the mine. Chad stepped forward. They blocked his path. There was no struggle, just silence. Then darkness. He woke in a room with no windows, no door, just stone. Time passed strangely. His hair didn't grow. His thirst never came. Sometimes he heard humming through the walls. Sometimes whispers. On the 7th day, or the 100th, he heard a voice, not spoken, in him. It showed him the mine, not as it was, but as it had been, an entrance to something older than America, older than language, built by those who came before, not from above, but below. The cue was a seed, and he had planted it. The mine was changing. It showed him the Jensens too. Descendants of an old bloodline, protectors of a covenant forgotten by most. Their faith was not just belief, it was pact. The cue had been hidden, not lost. Guarded. Waiting for the right vessel. He awoke again. He was not in the stone room, but outside, at the edge of the ranch. The land around the mine had changed. The earth pulsed gently beneath his feet. Crops flourished wildly, even out of season. Trees bloomed in rows they had never been planted. The desert was alive. The Jensens knelt before him. No words passed, only knowing. He walked back toward the mine. The wind swirled, warm and fragrant with sage and something ancient. The door opened for him again, the same way it had the first time. This time, it welcomed him. After being claimed by the Jensens, Chad stopped hearing from the world he knew. The phone calls dried up. The digital hum of his old life faded like a forgotten song. In its place came silence, thick, reverent, and ancient. He wasn't adopted in any legal sense. The paperwork didn't matter out here. The Jensen family didn't ask questions about where he came from. They simply took him in, folded him into their daily rituals, their quiet disciplines, their watchful eyes. Their land stretched for miles, brushed up against Blind Frog Ranch, a place the locals refused to name without a downward glance. Some said treasure lay buried there. Others whispered of radiation zones and government tunnels. The Jensens treated it like a sacred border, respected, feared, never crossed. But Chad felt the pull. Every morning he'd stare toward the dust-hazed hills beyond the fence line, where the land rose and broke open like a scar on the desert skin. He knew something was out there. The pull came in dreams. Each night, they grew more vivid. The same dark corridor under the ground, the same cool breath of wind against his neck, the same black stone pressing into his palm like a heartbeat. He found the map on the third Sunday. The Jensens had left for one of their long Sunday pilgrimages, dressed in heavy coats despite the heat, eyes set on something only they could see. Alone in the house, Chad drifted up to the attic. Dust layered the floorboards, untouched by decades. There, buried inside a cedar chest filled with old garments and dried lavender, he found a leather-bound journal and a yellowing map. The journal bore the Jensen family crest. The map was older, inked by hand, riddled with symbols. At its center, a winding path leading into the ground. The words "Inheritance of the Hollow" marked the base. From that moment, the silence of the house changed. It stopped being peaceful. It became expectant, like the hush in a church before the choir begins to sing. Chad left that night. The land of Blind Frog Ranch revealed itself slowly. The sun had long since fallen, but a violet hue still clung to the sky. Coyotes howled in the distance, their calls weaving in and out of one another like echoes of old truths. Chad moved quickly, guided by the lines of the map, past rusted machinery half swallowed by weeds, past a dry stream littered with bones too old to name. The land felt alive, not in the gentle way of growing things, but in the way a predator stirs before the strike. He found the entrance behind a curtain of juniper. The mine did not look like much. Just a black seam in the earth, wide enough for a man to crawl through if he dared. But Chad felt it. Beneath the surface, a pressure, a rhythm. He crouched low and entered. The air shifted immediately. Cold, damp, metallic. The flashlight flickered but held steady. The walls were too smooth. Not chiseled by hand, but cut, as if by something that knew the shape of earth and bone. Carvings lined the rock. Symbols that matched the ones on the map. Spirals, stars, serpent-like loops.